Great sailing ships like Wanderer, Charles W. Morgan, and Morning Star sailed the oceans in search of the magnificent beast. New Bedford was also the site of the U.S. revenue cutter Service, better known today as the United States Coast Guard. Now New Bedford specializes in the harvesting and production of fresh fish and scallops. Over 150 vessels leave New Bedford regularly for the fishing grounds of the Northwest Atlantic. They fish for cod, haddock, yellowtail flounder, scallops, and other incidental species on a year-round basis. For more than 40 years, the Eastern Rig Trawler has been the flagship of the New Bedford fleet. Averaging 90 feet in length, the boat operates with a crew of 6 or more and has a holding capacity of 100,000 pounds of seafood. The fish are harvested by means of a huge net lowered over the side into the water and dragged behind the boat. The scalloper is of similar design. You will notice, however, the addition of long enclosed passageways on either side of the pilot house. These are called shucking houses, and it is here that the scallops are extracted from their shells, washed, and bagged. The scalloping gear and machinery also differ from that of the fishing trawler. To gather scallops from the floor of the ocean, a huge steel drag is pulled through the sand behind the vessel. Recently, a new style of fishing vessel has been added to our growing fleet. This is the stern trawler, a modern steel-hulled craft that is setting the pace in fish boat design. This rugged craft is built to withstand the pounding waves and fierce winds of the unpredictable North Atlantic Ocean. The net, cable, and gear are wound onto a huge drum located in the center of the boat. When the signal is given, powerful hydraulic winches turn the drum and lower the net through the stern into the sea. All of the boats of the New Bedford fleet are equipped with modern safety and navigational gear. Many are using sophisticated electronic fish-finding equipment. In this view of the pilot house, to the left of the wheel, is the vessel's radar, while overhead, ship-to-shore radio and sonar are within easy reach of the operator. The compass and engine room controls are visible to the right of the wheel. This equipment means safer, more plentiful trips for the fishermen. Preparing the boats for sea requires the resources and manpower of the many industries that service the fleet. Nets are carefully inspected, and torn or weakened sections are replaced. Wire rope and cables are spliced and serviced from mobile trucks such as this while boats are dockside. The winches and deck machinery are some of the most important gear on board. Their constant exposure to the salt air and the stormy seas of the Northwest Atlantic necessitates the need for constant repair and maintenance. Shipboard supplies of power and equipment allow instant response to emergency conditions. Most boats go to sea for 10 days, and fuel is necessary to operate the main propulsion engines. This particular vessel has a fuel capacity of 15,000 gallons. Hourly consumption of fuel varies according to the type of fishing operations being conducted. The giant engines run continuously, providing power for fishing operations. Cleanliness is maintained not only in the harvesting areas of the boat, but below decks as well, as shown in this view of the passageway in the engine room. Additional diesel-electric generators manufacture a constant supply of heat, power, and light for the crew. Our early fishermen used salt to preserve their catches of fish. Today, large blocks of ice, manufactured on the waterfront, are ground up and pumped into the holds of the boat through a large hose. When their catch of fish is stored below, the ice is placed around it, keeping it until the boat returns home. The process of icing the fish has been a key factor in the success of the New Bedford fleet. Our crew will need food and provisions while out at sea. The boat will be their home, and good meals with balanced diets are essential to the men. The ship's cook will spend a good deal of his time ashore purchasing food and planning meals for the crew. Soon the boats are ready for their journey. The captain issues the command, and the men head for sea. Preparations for fishing start immediately as the long run begins down the New Bedford Harbor Channel. After leaving the channel, they cross Buzzards Bay and head out to sea. Their destination is George's Bank, the bountiful fishing area 150 miles from New Bedford. Some vessels may travel as far south as New Jersey waters. The trip to George's Bank will take 22 hours. At a predetermined location, the captain will bring the boat around to a favorable position into the wind. He will slow the boat down, and the net will be lowered into the water. Once set, the huge pocket-shaped bag is pulled through the water close to the bottom of the sea. Fishing may occur at different depths, but most nets are towed at a depth of approximately 30 fathoms. When the net is filled, it is hoisted aboard and the fish is sorted, stored in bins, and surrounded with ice. The scalloper harvests in depths of 100 feet or more. The steel drag is pulled across the sand, gathering up scallops along the way. At the end of the tow, the drag is hoisted aboard and the job of shucking begins. After the scallops have been removed from their shells, they are washed free of sand and particles. They are quickly bagged, placed below, and surrounded with ice, thus preserving their freshness. The fishing and scalloping will continue for 8 days. While out at sea, the men are in constant communication with the mainland as well as with other ships at sea. Should an emergency arise, help usually is not too far away. The United States Coast Guard has been patrolling the fishing grounds for over 50 years. Rescue helicopters such as this are on 24-hour alert and respond to an emergency within minutes. Inside the helicopter, a fully equipped rescue and safety station is maintained by the Coast Guard. When harvesting has been completed, the boats will come home to New Bedford. Upon arrival, the trawler or dragger will sell its catch at auction to the local processors. Here, fresh Atlantic cod are taken off the boat. The fish are individually weighed, packed whole into wooden boxes, and covered with ice. The box of fish is then sealed and transported by a refrigerated truck to the market, where the cod will be cleaned, dressed, and sold directly to the consumer. The processing of flounder begins with the weighing of the fish as it is taken off the boat. They are then hand-cut into fillets, washed, skinned, and trimmed automatically. These women will sort and inspect the fillets, carefully removing every trace of bone. After inspection, the fillets will be arranged and prepared for packaging. Finally, the packages of fillets are shipped under refrigeration to their destination. New Bedford processors supply seafood to many brand-name distributors. In this case, the fillets are not packaged here in New Bedford. They are placed in plastic tubs and sealed. The tubs are then loaded into wooden boxes and iced. The boxes of fish are then shipped in refrigerated trucks to the distributors for packaging and sale under brand names. Now let's go aboard a scalloper. Deep inside, the men are busy unloading the vessel. The bags of scallops are hoisted out of the hold and swung ashore. After weighing, The bags are stacked in wooden boxes and iced. The sealed boxes will be shipped under refrigeration to processing plants throughout New England for marketing and distribution. Maintaining New England's largest fishing fleet is a tremendous task. It requires the services of many skilled people. In the shipyards of Fairhaven, the railways are alive with activity as the carpenters, welders, machinists, and painters tend to the boats, which are hauled regularly for inspection and repair. The growing fishing industry is evidenced by the expansion of existing processing plants and the construction of new ones. New Bedford's industry represents a total investment of approximately $45 million. Next year, an estimated 78 million pounds of seafood will be landed in New Bedford by New Bedford fishermen. Seafood is recognized by families as an economical and popular food, rich in nutrients that are vital to good health. From protein, essential to bodily growth, to vitamins and minerals, New Bedford freshly harvested seafood is good, and good for you. The clear, cold waters of the North Atlantic are important to New Bedford and to the men and boats of New England's largest fishing fleet. Our fishermen will continue to be a major step in the journey of seafood as it travels from the ocean to your table. New Bedford, Massachusetts, where the seafood comes ashore.
All right, so that was our then. Like I said, that film reel is from about the mid-1960s. So that's sort of how it looked in the 60s. Now I'm going to turn it over to Phil Mello, who is the manager at Burgess Seafood, as well as a wonderful photographer. He gets, because of his position at Burgess, he's able to get lots of great behind the scenes footage of what's going on in the fishing industry. So I'm going to turn it over to Phil to share his screen, which he is doing.
Okay.
And
Can you hear me okay?
Yep, I can hear you. I'm gonna put the spotlight on you so everybody can see you. And you're good to go.
Very good. Well, that was a very interesting video that you had. It covered a lot of everything that that everyone should know about seafood. It was well put together. I don't know when that was done. I'm sure some of the folks that are watching probably could identify the time, what year it was. So I'm going to be showing you some of the modern day fleet, some of the old fleet, and how things are processed. And you're going to see a lot of similar pictures, but just modern. So here we go. So this is a shot of the fleet. This is back in the 80s. As you can see, there was way in the back, you can see all the Eastern rigs that they talked about. But way forward in the middle of the picture, you'll see the, I believe that's the Patriots, which is one of the newer boats that were built then by the Tishon family. And that was that's a stern trawler versus the Eastern rigs here. So this is more the modern day fleet. Going back to looking at these, you don't see any outriggers except one little boat here on the side. But nowadays, all these boats have these outriggers that help stabilize the boats when they're out at sea. Here's a shot of D.N. Kelly Shipyard. And like they said in that video we saw earlier, it's a lot of maintenance to these boats. On the Fairhaven side of the harbor here, the shipyard's from almost Route 6 all the way up to the Hurricane Dike. This is the little tugboat Louise that he had. It's a double-ended tug. It had a pointy bow and a pointy stern. And I believe that's the Moby Dick that's up there on the railways. Here is this is an Eastern rig, the Aloha, coming to the docks after the auction on a cold winter morning. This boat was seen in the other video also. This is a Libby owned by the, I believe it was the Murrays. And she's getting ice here at the in the ice house. And you can see the big steamer in the background on the other side of the bridge. Another Eastern rig. Some of these boats were rather large, some of them were small. This one right here, if you notice, there's a man standing in the bow of the boat. This boat right here doesn't have a whale back. I'll show you a picture of that a little later. And also, if you notice in the middle of the boat coming up, there's this metal pipe. Let me see if I can get my pointer to point to it. And that's the muffler coming up there. So some of these boats were actually sailing boats before, and then they adjusted them and put motors in them. Here's a perfect example. This is the Catherine and Mary. If you notice the mast on this boat, they're tilted aft a little bit because this boat was a schooner, and it was converted to but it had an engine put in later. And this is when she sailed out of New Bedford. I believe this is in the early 80s. She was sold to a family in P-Town. And the next time I saw this boat, it had a swordfish pulpit on the front, and it had a topmast here. They were using it for sword fishing. I believe that was Johnny Fireman's boat. Maybe Jimmy Kendall or somebody else could correct me on that, but I believe that it was a fellow that owned the boat was Johnny Fireman. This is the North Sea, another Eastern rig. As you can see, it's all decorated. Back in the 80s and late 70s, they used to do the Blessing of the Fleet. It was a big production. Everybody would get aboard. They have cookouts on there. They had a parade with all the boats. It was a lot of fun. Here's another old boat that was converted over. You can see the muffler that I was talking about. This is the Venture One leaving. She's passing Gay Head right now, or Quinner actually. And you can see this muffler right here that comes up. So these boats were used for years, and the crew was all exposed here when they were working. So when it blew like 30 miles an hour, these boats had to kind of stop fishing because it wasn't safe for the crew. And when the newer boats came, I'll show you how they would work differently. Here's another vessel. I believe this is over at this is New Atlantic, I believe, at the time. Nice old Eastern rig. Viking Queen, Ray Stavish's boat. She's tied up at Fairhaven here. This is a very interesting boat, the Lark. This is at D.N. Kelly's. This actually was a Eastern rig, and D.N. Kelly's converted it to a stern trawler for Jerry McCarthy. He was the owner of the boat, and boy, he could fish with that boat. It was small enough to get into certain areas. Notice the orange lifeboat in the top. That's what they had back then. So this is a Swordfish Boat. This is the Potpourri. This was offshore off of Nomans back in the late 70s. And there was a sword fishing fleet out in New Bedford. A lot of the boats. So they were harpoon swordfish. So the harpooner would stand here, and the men on the mast would help. This is where they would steer the boat. And if you look at this little wire right here that goes up this way, there was a speaker there. And the reason for that is an airplane would fly for the boats, and they would fly in a big figure 8 above the boat. And when they would see a fish, they'd go into a tight spin, and the harpooner or the striker that it was called would get up here, and there was a little speaker right here. And as the plane saw the fish, he would key his microphone and stay on the radio and talk the boat onto the fish. So these guys up here had a speaker also that they could hear, and they controlled the boat's speed, and they could turn the boat. So the plane would say, okay, you got a swordfish 2 boats away, 2 o'clock. And then he'd walk him, okay, 1 boat, 12 o'clock. And then they'd walk the boat all the way up to harpooning the fish. And when they'd strike the fish, it would go off. The harpoon would stay in the fish. This pole would stay with the boat, and the line would go out with a ball. And then they just let the fish tire itself out, and then they use this little boat here to go back and get the fish. Here's another Eastern rig. This one was owned by Rodney Avila, and he took it and made it a stern trawler by putting the net drum way in the back here. This is owned now by Bergeron Seafood. Even the boats, the fishing boats changed and the fuel changed. This was the old co-op boat that used to fuel up the boats. And after that terrible disaster in Alaska with the tanker that went down, they changed regulations. And this was considered a tanker, and it had to have double hull and everything else. So they scrapped it, I believe, and they just have tugs and barges now to fuel the boats up. So this is the modern day fishing vessel. As you can see, like I said before, the wheelhouse is forward. And now what happens is this boat is more productive because when it's blowing 30 mile an hour, this boat can still fish because the men are in the lee of the wind here. They're sheltered. So there's very few Eastern rigs. There's only a few of them that fish out of New Bedford, and I believe they're scallopers. This is the Mary Kay coming to the dock one beautiful morning, watching the sunrise. Luzo 1 steaming to the dock. Boats are the same, but they're all kind of little different. They all have their little different things. Now, this is like a shrimper style boat they had. When these boats were coming up, when they first came up in the 80s, they had outriggers. Down in the Gulf, they used these boats like that. And the wheelhouse was longer, and I believe there was the galley was in there and everything else for the men versus the other ships where they're below deck. Here's the Iberia coming to the dock one morning. Another Western rig. Here's a lobster boat coming by, picking up his bait early in the morning, breaking the ice around the dock so he can work his way in there. This is the Double Vision Hudson Fry's boat. This is São Paulo coming to the dock. Tony Borges. Tony had a near miss with death with coronavirus. He got really sick, and he got the special vaccine, or not the vaccine, but the special medicine that the president had, and it saved his life. He was really hurting. Thought he was going to die, told me. So Marcus heading to the boat, heading to the dock. This is a scalloper. You notice that the scalloper's got these two booms in the back. That's how you can identify the boats versus the draggers. You only see like one boom on the draggers. Everyone tying up, getting ready to offload. Notice the deck on this boat, sheet of ice. And here he is trying to get his balance to throw the line in. More K coming to the dock. Another beautiful morning. Notice a little bit of ice on the boats. This boat's from Rhode Island. I believe it's coming in with Fluke. A lot of the Rhode Island boats will come when they have a mass permit to offload in Massachusetts. They'll come in, steam all the way up here to offload 2,000 pounds of Fluke. It's kind of crazy. Rose Marie coming to the dock. Unfortunately, this boat burnt at sea. No one was hurt. Fire happened in the engine room and they couldn't control it. And I don't know if they're rebuilding the boat or they had to scrap it, but the main thing is no one was hurt. It happens in all kinds of weather. Weather means nothing for these men that work in these boats. It's another day. This is the tradition. This boat's out of the Point Judith. I believe this boat has just been sold. He's a young man who I think is in his early 40s, late 30s or early 40s. He's got two young children, and he just can't bear being on George's Bank with this boat all the time, being away from his family. So he actually sold this boat and he bought a smaller boat to fish closer to the shore to try to be home every day to be with his kids. And this is the other family boat, the Heritage. Another brother, Tommy Williams, runs this one. Now we're going to talk about the offloading, and you're going to see a lot of things very, very similar to what we saw in the movie. This is Joe Manise. He's offloading some fluke on a boat. Here he is in the fish hole. And Joe's a lumper. I think everybody knows what a lumper is by now. And this is on a scalloper, same kind of deal. 3 bags go up in the basket. Each bag weighs around 50 pounds. Here's some redfish being swung to the dock. So this gentleman's a fisherman. I think his name's Tony. I can't quite remember his last name. But sometimes they hire lumpers to do these jobs, and sometimes the fishermen themselves do it. And he fished this trip, and he's helping to offload it. He's what is called working the hatch. Another boat coming up. I think that's monkfish coming up here. Some boat with some codfish up. This gentleman's a fisherman also. Some haddock coming up off the Mary Kay. Scallops coming up off of one of the scallopers. As you can see, the weather doesn't matter. If it's going to snow or rain, they still do their job. The baskets are swung up to the dock, and in the pictures you saw before, the baskets were dumped on a chute, and the chute had grates in it, and the ice would drop down. But you had to have an extra person there to always kind of get the ice out, because the seafood dealer doesn't want to buy the ice. He just wants to buy the fish. So in the foreground here is a tank. The basket drops here, and then you'll see some shots of the person dumping it. And what it does, once the fish is dumped into the tank, the ice floats and the fish go down, and a conveyor belt brings them up. So none of the ice comes up in the chute like the old days. Here's some squid that we're offloading on a nice cold day. Some Georgia flounders, it looks like. Nope, sea dabs, I'm sorry. Here's some cod. I think it's raining this day. So here's Joe. Joe is culling the fish. He's working the chute now. So as you can see here is the conveyor belt. The fish is dropping down here. There's no ice piled in there. And that's Joe's grandson, Chris. And what he's doing, he's sizing the fish. So the fishermen put the fish in pens by their size, like scrod, certain size of snappers are large. And sometimes bigger fish or smaller fish is mixed in, so we have to separate it when it comes down. Here's a picture of Mark Bergeron, one of the owners of Bergie Seafood. And that's his grandson and his son. So there's 3 different generations there in the fish business. And I believe that's butterfish they're pushing down the chute. Here's Terry. Terry's working a boat with haddock, and he's also doing the same thing, sizing them up. So in the other video, we saw them putting it in wooden boxes. That stopped many years ago because the FDA felt that the bacteria rate was very high in it, and plus it was getting so expensive to do the wooden boxes. So now we have these cardboard boxes. The fish are put into it, and the lid goes down. And that's going to be shipped to, out of the city. These are 100-pound fish totes, and this is what we use to ship to like Boston or to or a supplier here in New Bedford, or to keep ourselves. And when we go there and drop off the totes, we get our totes back. Where if we did that to someone in New York or Baltimore, we sometimes never get the totes back, and it gets to be very expensive. So that's why we ship in cardboard going out of town, and locally, Boston, New Bedford, we ship in totes. That's a 100-pound fish tote being tossed up. Here's the captain of the San Marcos, Manny. So here's the scallops. Now, if you take a look here, there's ice stuck on the bags. And this, if you notice on this table here, this is the dumping table, there's these ridges. And what they do is they run the scallop bag across those ridges to get the ice off them, because we don't want to buy the ice, especially with the price of scallops being so high. So the gang takes it, and the bags come up, and then they scrape the ice off them. That's what they're doing right here. They're scraping the ice off. And they take 3 bags. Here's some more scraping. So they take, this is Jamie, who works for Burgess, and they take 3 bags and put it on the scale. They yell out the weight. Over here in the corner is the captain of the boat or the mate, and an employee of the house that's taking out. This happens to be Burgess, but if it was at the fish auction, it'd be the same thing. And each person records the numbers, so they want to make sure there's no mistakes. So he'll be yelling out like 151 or 150, usually because there's 50 pounds in a bag. Scallops are sold by count. So this is, we rip a bag open every once in a while to verify the count, because if the captain says, oh, I have 10, 20 count, and then we offload it and we rip the bag and we count it's 23 count or 22 count, that's technically a 10, 20 scallop, so it gets different money. So after so many bags, we rip the bag open and take a count to make sure that the count's accurate. So the bags are put in these big cardboard vats. There's Mark Bergeron putting in dropping a 50-pound bag of scallops into a vat. And we put a layer of bags in, and we put a layer of ice. We ice up the vats and they're shipped out that way. We do ship some smaller quantities, like a couple bags, or we'll put some in totes for smaller customers, but these are basically going to the processors that freeze. And we'll talk a little about the process. So in your video we saw earlier, there was someone cutting a fillet on wood. That is a no-no. Everything has to be stainless steel. With the new regulations now, the FDA, there's no wood allowed anywhere in the plant. Years ago, you used to have wooden fish knife with a wooden handle on it. They all have to be plastic handles now. You have to cut fish on plastic boards that can be bleached every night. So everything's stainless steel. This is a cutting bench, by the way. All the different stalls. Up here, you'll see these pipes come down. This is water, so when the fish is dumped, they get to wash it down and get the ice away from it because it's heavily iced. These are skinning machines. These are Bata 47s. They are very old, but they're the king of the flatfish skinning. Every plant has them. As you can see, everything is stainless. This is a machine that cuts codfish automatically. So it cuts, there's a part we can't see here that heads the fish. And then this machine right here cuts it. The 2 fillets drop on either side. It comes down here, and there's a Bata 51. It automatically skins it, and it drops for the girls to trim it. We also cut cod by hand, but sometimes when we're very busy, we use the machine. This is a flatfish machine we have. That's Pablo. Pablo's the man. And he's just getting ready to start up the machine. This machine cuts flatfish. So here's a shot of a typical work day. The totes are here on the floor. The orders are coming in. The salesmen are taking orders, and we'll have maybe some haddock here, maybe some flounder here, whatever. As you see, some redfish up on the bench here. There might be a customer that needs 20 pounds or so like that, so we'll give it to one customer to cut it. This is Russ Swire, one of the cutters at Burgess Seafood many years ago. I think I took this back in maybe 2009. Russ taught me how to cut fish. And I first started working in the fish business in 1980 at Tishon Seafood. And Russ was the cutter there. So I got up on the bench one afternoon, and they dumped a box of flounders in front of me. And the cutting bench had 2 conveyor belts, one for the good product, the fillet, and one for the gurry, the bones. So I struggled. I'm trying to cut this, and my fillet went down to the wrong chute and went down to where the gurry went. And I got all upset. I said, oh my God, my fillet went down there. And he said, that's where that one belonged. In other words, I did poor workmanship on it. Russ is on ticket. He's retired now. Here's Eli. Eli's cutting some fish at the plant. This is another shot I took back in 2009. If you ever go to Turk Seafood, this is the guy that cuts the fish there. Great guy, Eli. So here's a day that the whole bench is filled with cutters, 12 spaces. They're cutting haddock. We have a big haddock order going. And if you noticed here, everyone's facing this way except for this lady, because she's left-handed. So she's turned the other way because she handles the fish totally different than everyone else has it. It's Pat. Here's Hugo cutting some haddock. As you can see, the fish are laid out in front of him. There's that water that comes down they can wash it down with. He has a little stone here that keeps his knife sharpened. Cutting some yellowtail here, Alejandros. Also cutting some yellowtail here. I forgot this gentleman's name. We have women that cut fish and men. A lot of the women will do different jobs also in the plant. They'll pack fish and everything like that, but a few of them are very talented that they can cut fish also. This is Mariana. Mariana's been working for Burgess for quite some time. She started when she was, I think, 18. She's in her 20s now. Mariana can do everything. She's run at every position there. She's cut fish, she's packed fish, she's done the orders. And recently, a couple of 3 years ago, we were short a salesman, and we brought her up in the office because she knows all the fish, how it's packed. So it was a good deal for us and a good deal for her. So this is the skinning machine. This is the Bata 47 I was talking about. And right here, this blurry thing, that's a blade, and it's going back and forth rather rapidly. And the conveyor belt's coming down. This is the conveyor belt that you lay the fillets on. And the fillet comes down, and this blade's going back and forth, and it grabs the skin. And as it grabs the skin, the fillet comes through and then goes down on this other conveyor to be packed. That's how they're skinned. There are some, in the Fulton fish market, and they don't have these machines, they skin by hand, but this is the only way you can really do it mass production. So similar to the picture you saw earlier, all the women trimming the fish. This orange stuff you see here, that's the roe of the fish. And that hurts us sometimes because we pay a certain amount for the fish. And then when we cut it, this roe is not used and our yield goes down. So certain times of the year, the yields change and stuff because of the nature of the fish. And this is how we do it during the pandemic. As you can see, all the ladies have their face masks, shields on. They have the barriers in between them to keep everyone healthy. The health department comes in and checks us, every other week or so. All happy to be working. This is Maria. She's taking the fillets off the conveyor belt from the skinning machine. Here's Mariana again, checking, trimming the fish, make sure there's no bones in it. Same thing here. They're candling the fish to make sure it's all perfectly trimmed. This is fluke fillets they're doing. She's just taking the little nape part off there. They'll trim this off. That's what you see here. They'll take a fillet that has been cut and just trim it up a little bit before they pack it. These are fillets over here that are already done. So in the video we saw, the tubs were bigger. They were 20-pound tubs. And it's kind of changed over that everybody uses the 10-pound tub now, because you can sell 20 pounds with the 2 10s, but if some customer wants a 10, you got it packed in a 20, you got to repack it. So it's kind of an industry standard now to pack in these 10-pound plastic rounds. And this is what your flatfish go in. Your codfish and haddock go into this type of a tub. So now after she's packed it, see when the girls are packing it, as you see this tub down here, they kind of get an estimate. They know when they fill it up, it should be close to 10 pounds. So what she's doing right now, she's removing a fillet or two to make sure it's exact 10 pounds. We don't overpack it. So she's checking the scale to make sure it's 10 pounds. Then they put the plastic lid on it. And then they have a grease crayon that they write on top of the lid. And this happens to be fluke they were packing. So they're packing the fluke and they're putting 80 pounds in a cardboard box. It gets iced up just like years ago. And then they seal the box and they staple it. Here you see these white styrofoam boxes. A lot of store chains pack in these styro boxes. The reason they do that is so they can mix freight in their truck. So they can stick this fish on the truck with chicken or some produce, whatever like that, and it's not leaking all over the place and it keeps it sealed. So there is these styro packs that we do. So the fish is wrapped in a bag and sealed up in there, and then we put the ice on it and put a cover on it. And these are 5-pound styros you see here in this picture. So when you go to a restaurant and you see these delicious dishes, you think of the hard men that work at sea and the vessels and what it takes, everything from the plant, to the fishermen, to the plant, to the workers. This is a chowder dish, actually, that has a piece of fish on the top of it. And fish and chips. So thank you so much for watching my slideshow and supporting the Heritage Center. It's up to you, all yours, Hannah.
Thank you. Thanks, Phil. It's so interesting to see, the parts of the industry that are kind of behind closed doors, if you will. So thank you so much for sharing. And thanks to everybody who's still here. If folks have questions, if you want to pop them in the chat, you're welcome to. If you want to unmute yourself, turn your camera on and out loud ask a question of Phil, you're welcome to do that as well. All right, we do have a question in the chat. So Crystal asks, what is the average hourly wage of a fish cutter?
Ooh, good question. I believe it's, you cut me there. I believe it's like, I want to say $15 an hour. I'm not sure exactly. It could be a little bit off there, but it's close to that.
Okay. No.
Is she looking for work?
Maybe. Lots of thank yous. Thank you, Phil. Great photos. Very interesting presentation. Wonderful, entertaining, and informative. Very interesting. Well, if nobody else-
I have a question.
Yeah.
Okay, are all commercial fishermen members of a union?
No. Years ago, there was a union. I hope Jim Kendall's still on there because he would know more of this than I do. There was, hey, Jim. So there was a union many years ago, and they were union fishermen and non-union fishermen. But I believe that union is no longer. So it's the men go out fishing when the boats come in. The boats are settled up. So when the processing plant or the fish auction buys them, the check for the whole catch goes to a settlement house, and it's actually settled very familiar where it was the whaling days, where they so much goes to the owner of the boat, so much goes to the boat's expenses, the ice, the grub, the fuel, and then the captain gets a different cut, the mate gets a different cut, the engineer gets a different cut, and the cook, and then they settle it up that way. But in as much as a union now, I don't believe there's any union.
Does that hold true for the rest of the fishing industry? For instance, lumpers and the folks that work in the packing plants or packing houses that cut the fish and weigh it. None of them. So there's no aspect of the commercial fishing industry as it pertains to New Bedford has any kind of union affiliation. Is that correct?
I don't believe so. I know for a fact that the fish house workers do not. That union was broken back in the 80s. It fell apart. There was a lumpers union. Jim, you could help me out on this one. I don't know if it's still available. It's still viable or not.
Yeah, I believe there's still members, within that union. I'm not quite sure what the strength or how much of it remains, but all the unions basically got broken back around the 80s is pretty much the timeline for it. And there was some real adversarial confrontations back then. When
go ahead.
The AFL, originally we were part of the Seamen's International Union. New Bedford was part of the Seamen's International. And then the Teamsters came in and they wanted to reorganize the union and help the fishermen. And I remember going aboard one of their tractor trailers where they had an office and a classroom set up so they could inform the fishermen how much better it would be. They were here for a few years, and then all of a sudden, one of their members who was pushed aside, decided he wanted to reorganize once again. And they started reorganizing back for the AFL-CIO, and everything fell apart. There was just so much problems going on with the vessels and the strikemen and everything. It just tore the union apart, which is a shame because we had some real good benefits that we were adding to as part of the union. And but you know, I know I was captain at that point, and I had a lot of problems on the waterfront. One of the delegates from one of the unions threatened to take my head off and hand it to me in my lap and stuff.
Well, that's nice.
Yeah. So I mean, it was really a problem. And I had been fishing for like 25 years at that point, and knew all of these guys, all the strikers, half of them, you know, I worked with at some point or another. But that's what happens when you go into those kind of confrontations.
No, I don't live in New Bedford anymore. I was born and raised, and I have fishermen in my family. I was never a fisherman though. These were Avalas and Botellos, and they owned their own boats, and they captained the boat, and they had people that worked for them. They're all relatives, in most cases. But are there any people who actually own a boat or two but never set foot on it? They just own the boat like a baseball owner, but he doesn't manage the team. You know, he has a manager. Do they have a skipper or a captain runs the ship for them? But
absolutely. Now, you're related to the Avalas. The boat that you saw here, the Potpourri, that's Joe Avala's boat. You related to Joe?
Well, the Avalas are on they're married into my cousin's girl cousins married into them. I know Jimmy Avala and his brother Louis. They're all passed now, and their father was a Joe Avala, but there's so many Avalas. There's probably a dozen Joe Avalas. I don't know. But my uncle Danny Patello used to own the Ruth and Nancy and the Gloria B. I don't know if that means anything to anybody.
No, that's a little before my time, I think.
Those were old wooden boats.
Yes. Yep.
Well,
I have a question.
yeah.
My name is Nadine. I work for a local radio station, and this has been really interesting, Phil. Thank you for the presentation. You were showing some examples of like the skinning machines, and you were saying that some facilities don't use skinning machines. They'll skin by hand, but this obviously allows you to do it in mass. Right. And it made me think about how technology has impacted like manual labor versus depending on technology in order to get the processing job done. What percentage of processing fish is dependent on human labor that just cannot be done by machine versus technology?
Well, we have the machines, but we hardly use them now because the industry's changed so much. There's not as much fish coming in like it was years ago. We have little spurts that we have quite a bit of fish, but you know, years ago, you had a full bench working and you had a machine working because that's how much fish was around. Anyone will tell you that a hand cutter will do a much better job than a machine will do. I have customers that they find out I cut some fish by machine, they won't buy it. The hand cutter is far superior as far as I'm concerned. It's more costly, yes, but does a better job and it gets a better yield. Sometimes the machine doesn't get as much yield. So say, like, I'll give you an instance. When we cut a Georgia Bank flounder without any roe in it, we get like 42%. Well, the machine will give me 40% or sometimes 39%. But I only have 2 people running the machine where I have 10 people cutting the fish. So it's a toss up. The skinning machines, they've been around for years. I mean, the people that skin by hand are small independent places, like a place like Turk Seafood in Mattapoisett. He has a fish cutter there and they'll skin by hand because it just doesn't, you won't have the room to have a machine and it just doesn't pay to have it because he does that much of a volume. But any fish house that does production like we do will have a skinning machine.
Thanks, Phil. Appreciate it.
Can I ask a couple more questions? I don't want to hog everything.
It's up to Hannah. She's the boss.
Go for it.
Okay. Commercial fishing, the fishermen, that is a very dangerous occupation. What about health insurance? do the fishermen belong to a specific health insurance plan?
Well, Jim could probably answer that a little bit better. I know this fishing partnership here in New Bedford and Gloucester, and they teach the fishermen safety training and help them with insurance policies and health care and stuff. But I don't believe there's any set thing. Is there, Jim?
Well, about 25 years ago, we started the Massachusetts Fishermen's Partnership, which is a group of fishing industry groups from within the state. About 25 of those, 20 of those are members of the Mass Fishermen's Partnership. The only way we could organize, because each one of those fishing organizations has different interests and basically are competitors. The one thing we all had in common was healthcare. We didn't have it. The Massachusetts fishing industry was one of the most woefully underinsured groups in the country, with less than 40% or around 40% of us were insured. And a lot of that came from the wives who had to work just to get the insurance. So we devised a way to build an insurance plan or program, which we call the Fishing Partnership Support Services. Now it was the Fishing Partnership, I can't even think of it now. Anyways, we started that insurance program for the Massachusetts fishermen. And the only reason we were able to do that was Barney Frank, who was still in office at the time, got us several $1 million of seed money. And it's been in effect, it was in effect for like 20 years, the healthcare program. When the state started with the healthcare, we eventually rolled out of the insurance care part of it. And now they're doing more or less like HR work, where they work for the industry or work with the industry, supporting the industry on a lot of the interests, including safety training and healthcare programs, and setting them up that way. So it just keeps evolving and gets better and better each time you look at it.
Thanks,
And
Jim. You're my wingman tonight, Jim.
Does the United States Coast Guard impose strict regulations and restrictions on the fishing fleet? And do they ever board a vessel while the vessel's at sea for some type of inspection?
Oh, yeah.
Yes, they do. They do board the vessels, but I think the regulations are done by the federal government on the fisheries anyway, NOAA. But the Coast Guard are out there actually doing the enforcement at sea.
Coast Guard does not make regulations. They enforce them. They might suggest them that they need to be developed or written, but they actually do not write any of the regulations, strictly enforcement.
Thank you.
Great questions. And I'm proud to be your wingman.
Thanks, Jim. Nice seeing you again.
Thank you.
I have a
Phil,
question.
thank you, Phil and Jim, for
Got a
being
question?
here and being informed.
Yeah,
Questions?
yeah, Phil.
Yes.
I had a question with the sword fishing. I like that photograph with the spotting plane and how the communications and how much of that is still going on, and if it isn't, what happened, and that it isn't.
Well, the harpoon sword fishing industry. So there was harpoon fishing, and there was long line fishing. So long liners would set these big trawls out with hooks on them, and they let these trawls go overnight for a couple days, whatever, and then they'd pull the fish up, and they would bring them aboard and ice them up. The difference between the two is the harpoon fish was relatively killed while it was still alive, and the longline fish would sit there and struggle trying to get off the hook, and it would warm the meat up and overcook it, and it wasn't as good as fish. Also, the hooks would catch anything. They'd catch real small pups, what they call them, swordfish pups, and it kind of ruined the industry. It depleted the fishery. A harpoon boat would be going on. If they saw a small fish, they wouldn't bother with it because they know the market value isn't there, so they would stay away from them. They would be selective. But the longliners, the hooks are down there, the fish comes up, they're going to take it. It's dead. So the fishery kind of died, I want to say, late 80s, early 90s. And there was a big push by chefs in the country. They said, we're not going to take any more of these small swordfish because they were coming in. and they said these fish should grow and be bigger and multiply. So they actually boycotted swordfish, United States swordfish. So the industry kind of died out. They tell me now that if you go out there, you will see some fish. It's starting to come back, but I don't see any commercial boats out of New Bedford. Some of the boats come, that do the tuna fishing. They'll come in certain times of the year. We have the Discovery Channel chasing those tuna boats that were on TV for a while. But the swordfish, harpoon swordfish, was kind of done. It's just about killed it.
Great, thanks.
Hi, Joanne.
Any last questions? Well, if you do have more questions, you're welcome to email me and I can help answer them for you. My email is programs@fishingheritagecenter.org. Thank you all for tuning in. Thank you to Phil for the wonderful presentation and for answering the questions, and Jim Kendall for also answering questions. I think Jim's answered questions the last couple times we've had presentations, actually. I'll plug what's going on at the center quickly before I end this call. We are closed to the public at the moment. We are actually in the process of installing a brand new permanent National Endowment for the Humanities funded permanent exhibit. So if you came into the center right now, there's basically nothing in it. We are emptied out and in the process of getting all new panels and digital media and videos and photos and audio clips all into that space. So we're in the process of getting that all installed right now. We are looking at maybe a late March, early April opening. We will be sure to post it on our Facebook, update our website, put it in our e-newsletter when all of that is going to happen. So just make sure you're following us in one of those places. The new exhibit is going to cover some of the topics that people had questions about tonight, including a history of the unions, some of the strikes that took place on the working waterfront in the 1980s that kind of ended the fishermen's union and the processors unions as we knew them at that point. So come to the center once we have the new exhibit open and learn lots more about those kinds of topics. So I think that's plenty for now. If you have questions, like I said, you can email me at programs@fishingheritagecenter.org, and I'm happy to answer them and to help, figure out whatever you need. So thank you all for tuning in, and I hope you have a wonderful Friday evening.
Thank you, Hannah.
Thank you. Nice job. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you. Thank you all for tuning in.
Thank you.
Thanks
Bye.
for a great show.
Thank you. Take care.
Good night.
Night now.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you, Phil.
Oh, thank you. Have a good night.
You too.
My pleasure.
Great job, Phil. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura.
Thanks, Phil.
Hey, Joanne. Welcome. Thank you.